Thank you, Sarah. I want to welcome the members to the annual meeting of the Atlantic Avenue Healthcare Property Holding Corporation, and happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody. It is necessary that there be certain legal notifications read into this record, and we've asked Sarah Richards to take care of that for us. Sarah?
Great, thank you. As a result of the continuing COVID-19 situation, there is an executive order 202.1 as extended that allows this board to meet remotely and take authorized actions without allowing public in-person access to these meetings, as long as the public has the opportunity to participate. We will have a transcript of this meeting posted as soon as practicable, and an audio and video recording will be posted on the DASNY website within 2 days. The record will reflect those present at this meeting, but we did read the roll for the board meeting just concluded. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it back over to you.
Ms. Richards, thank you very much. The agenda indicates that we would normally begin with the election of officers, but we've asked the president to give his report first in the meeting because of the significance of some of the items to be discussed.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Atlantic Avenue subsidiary, we've had a lot of activity over the last 6 to 8 months. And I thought it would be appropriate, given that some new board members, as well as some of you have been around a long time, probably forgot some of the things that happened over that period of time, that we should review kind of how we got to today. This is a seminal moment for us because we are doing some refinancings, we restructured the lease and other things. I could read that to you, but I would actually rather have Craig Schreiber, who actually lived through this and did all the work on it, give us a summary of kind of where we have been with this transaction and where we are today. And I think it gives us good context for the board meeting itself to have that history. So, Craig?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, all. So my presentation today is intended to provide an overview of the annual Atlantic Avenue President's Report, which is included in the board materials, and to briefly explain the history of how we got here. So as a review, Interfaith Medical Center was one of 11 hospitals to finance under the New York Secured Hospital Program, a program that dates back to the mid-1980s and was designed to enable financially distressed hospitals to achieve access to the municipal bond markets for the purpose of raising capital for their obsolescent facilities. In its simplest term, the state agreed that for bonds issued under the program, if all else failed and subject to annual appropriation, the state would ultimately be responsible for paying debt service on the bonds. The Atlantic Avenue subsidiary was formed as part of the approved 2013 bankruptcy reorganization plan for Interfaith Medical Center to take title to Interfaith's real property following the default by Interfaith on its bond and loan agreements with DASNY. As property owner, Atlantic Avenue entered into a lease with Interfaith, which allowed the hospital to continue operations on the campus after emerging from bankruptcy. Lease payments, if and when made by Interfaith, were used by Atlantic to cover costs associated with owning the property and to help offset state payments to bondholders, as Interfaith's obligation to pay Series 2007 bondholders was discharged in bankruptcy. Bondholders continue to be paid by the state of New York for any deficiencies and principal and interest payments pursuant to the state service contract. So while efforts to improve sustainability are ongoing, the restructured Interfaith, which as you'll hear in a minute is actually now part of Brookdale Hospital Medical Center, remains highly dependent upon state support, and staff expects this situation to continue this year. The last year has proven quite active for Interfaith and in turn, Atlantic Avenue. To start, the Interfaith bankruptcy finally came to a close in 2020 as the final few claims involving the Interfaith Medical Center Dispersing Trust were settled and any unused funds were returned to Atlantic Avenue. These returned funds were used to cover ongoing costs associated with owning the property, mostly insurance related, and the balance was used to offset the majority of the February 15th, 2021 bondholder payment being made by the state under the service contract. Next, Interfaith in the entire One Brooklyn Health System, which also includes Brookdale Hospital Medical Center and Kingsbrook Jewish, Medical Center, continued to progress with its transformation plan using funds from a $664 million grant the system was awarded back in 2018. To date, approximately $75 million of grant funding has been dispersed OBHS by the Department of Health toward the various project components. The three priorities of this plan are the establishment of a 30-plus site ambulatory care network, integrated IT system improvements to standardize clinical and patient accounting applications, and facility infrastructure investments to support the clinical restructuring of member hospitals. So separately, under the auspices of Governor Cuomo's Vital Brooklyn initiative, and in combination with special legislation passed 2 years ago, a parcel owned by Atlantic Avenue was conveyed in 2020, pursuant to a state-run RFP and a plan to create affordable housing and increase access and quality of healthcare services to transform Central Brooklyn. DASNY staff is working with New York State Homes and Community Renewal, DOH, DOB, and other state officials on the potential transformation of 4 total Atlantic Avenue properties off the main hospital campus. As you recall, the Atlantic Avenue Board approved the transfer of a Herkimer Avenue parcel in September of 2020, and staff is expected to seek board approval in the coming year for conveyance of the other 3 parcels for similar purposes. A fourth major event from the past year occurred at the start of 2021 when Interfaith Medical Center and Kingsbrook Medical Center officially merged into Brookdale Hospital Medical Center, which remains the sole surviving and legal entity. Such a merger had been contemplated since the formation of the One Brooklyn Health System in 2016 and is in furtherance of the OBHS transformation plan. As reported at the December 2020 Atlantic Avenue board meeting, Brookdale assumed the liabilities of the merging hospitals, including the interfaith lease with Atlantic Avenue, which was then amended, and a $29 million note for interfaith lease payment arrearages, while certain other hospital obligations were consolidated and collateral was expanded. I urge you to keep this topic fresh in your mind for when I touch on proposed reporting changes by Atlantic Avenue to the New York State Authority's budget office in a moment. My final update centers around operations and COVID. As if Interfaith and OBHS weren't busy enough this last year with the activities previously mentioned, they were also hit hard by the COVID pandemic. Like many other New York City hospitals, Interfaith saw its fair share of COVID patients while experiencing a precipitous overall decline in discharges in 2020, not to mention an even greater drop in emergency room visits, all while dealing with much sicker patients. The continued flow of state subsidy funding in combination with federal financial assistance for COVID-related expenses and lost revenue, along with Medicare accelerated payments, helped Interfaith and One Brooklyn Health financially endure the many challenges of this past year. These represent the major occurrences related to Interfaith and Atlantic Avenue from the past year. Before I conclude my presentation, however, I wish to touch on one other topic and make one disclaimer. Coming up soon in the Atlantic Avenue Board agenda is the annual review of mission statement, performance measures, and metrics. Before you for your consideration is a proposed change to the performance measures and metrics submitted annually to the New York State Authority's budget office by Atlantic Avenue. While the mission statement and measures 1 through 3 remain appropriate, the 4th measure and metric is no longer attainable due to recent changes to the interfaith lease, and we are proposing it be eliminated. The 4th measure basically speaks to the interfaith rental payments covering Atlantic Avenue's costs associated with this property and helping offset future state service contract payments. At the time of the Interfaith and Kingsbrook merger into Brookdale, the interfaith lease was assigned to Brookdale and payments were reduced to a nominal monthly amount in exchange for certain considerations to the state. With ongoing lease payments now insufficient to cover costs or offset any of the state's future service contract payments, we are recommending that the fourth measure metric be eliminated. Such metric currently reads, payments received for use and occupancy of the corporation's real and personal property more than cover the corporation's cost of maintaining, operating, and administering the property, and provide some offset to the state service contract payments. Such reporting change was presented to the Atlantic Avenue Governance Committee on March 2nd, 2021, and is now being presented, or will be presented, to the full Atlantic Avenue board. As to my one disclaimer, it should be noted that the proposed refunding of the secured hospital bonds through the Pitt sales tax bonds, as presented to the DASNY board earlier today by Matt Bergen, is not expected to impact the role or activities of Atlantic Avenue for the foreseeable future. Staff will continue to monitor and support the Department of Health, DOB, and the administration on all matters. This concludes my prepared remarks, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Al. Are there questions for Craig?
The three parcels that are coming down the pike, that goes into sort of, I guess, homes, right? Are there proceeds that come from those, or that's just sort of one of the similar thing that we did a couple of months ago, where we basically just sort of conveyed it, I think, for $1 or so?
Yeah, so the three parcels that you speak, you know, which are included in the president's report, the written report, the Broadway, Prospect Place, and East New York Ave, we're talking nominal considerations for those parcels. So no. Basically, the land will be gone. I got it. Yeah, the land will be transferred. There will be, you know, affordable housing built on it, and the hospital will actually get a lease, a long-term lease, to put in some clinical services for a long, you know, for about a 50-year lease.
That's correct. And this is Tracy Raleigh from the Department of Health, and I just want to commend Craig on that outstanding overview of the history, because I've certainly lived it along with him. And these are really, these affordable housing projects were really part of the Vital Brooklyn Plan, which really spoke to the, you know, not just the physical healthcare aspects, but also the social determinants. So providing housing and then wrapping it with services to be provided by One Brooklyn, such as, you know, needed primary care and specialty physician care in those communities. So that is what those transactions represent. But to the question, there is, my understanding also, Housing and Community Renewal does the RFPs and is issuing the bonds to support the affordable housing, but there isn't expected to be much in terms of payment for the transfer of the land.
So when that's completed, does that role then sort of end? Is that sort of when that separate entity sort of goes away? Not ready yet? No?
So
oh, go ahead, Craig. Yeah.
You're talking about the Atlantic Avenue role, our subsidiaries role? Yeah, so keep in mind, there's these three parcels are just small parcels. There's still gonna be, we're still gonna own the main hospital campus and a lot of property still. Our role will stay in place for the foreseeable future. If you recall, you know, as in my presentation, there is a note outstanding that's owed to Atlantic Avenue that was assumed by Brookdale regarding the $29 million in lease arrearage payments, and that comes due in 2028. So.
And Ricardo, correct me if I'm wrong, but the nominal consideration for the conveyance of the properties was authorized by statute.
By statute. Otherwise, we would have had an obligation to basically take in fair value. So, as discussed in our last meeting, the legislation basically provided us a means to basically
convey it at nominal value.
Thank you.
The other point I'd like to make is the PIT sales tax transaction actually provides about $10 million or so of savings from the current way the state is paying for this. So that consolidation is helpful to just reducing the cost of this from the state perspective.
Thank you. That's
Just because it's mentioned in the PIT one, what are we still doing with North General? Are we sort of out of that one?
we're gonna get there in a minute.
All right. Okay.
It is the next meeting.
Thank you. That was a very
Craig, I want to
excellent presentation. Thank you.
Tracy's absolutely right. So as I have said to you in the past, you do this thing really well. It was a great presentation. Helped my understanding a great deal. Let me ask a question that may be unfair. Now that that Interfaith and Kingsbrook have merged into Brookdale, may I assume the dissolution of the two boards of those hospitals?
That, you want me to take that, Craig? Or?
Oh, go ahead, Tracy, sure.
Yeah, so that, very good question, Al. That had already occurred. So previous to that, there was one board, but there were still separate corporations, which sometimes often happens.
Yes.
But now this actually goes to, one balance sheet, one P&L. So previous to this, there was one management team and one board, but now we have, what we say in the licensure world, one operating certificate, with 3 campuses. It really facilitates the further transformation and integration that's coming, and that's happening. And as Craig said, the One Brooklyn system has been through a lot, as in serving through the COVID pandemic, but efforts are underway to continue to transform and integrate the care, not only within the hospitals, but more importantly within the ambulatory care network, including the federally qualified health centers and other physician groups in the communities.
I remember when we first got the news on Interfaith, 10 years ago. Remember, Interfaith was always sort of at a different level than the other surrounding hospital, and then they had some issue with their reporting system or their, remember this whole thing with their financing recording system, and the next thing you know, it was rather
it's amazing.
Interesting
talking about it.
I know it's been a long time. I mean, listen, thank you. Tracy lives and breathes it.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your good work now.
Any other questions? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that the support of DASNY in these transactions and overall has been tremendous. So thank you from the health department.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Any other questions for Craig? Hearing none, we'll go back to the agenda. The first agenda item is the election of officers. You see the slate. It's under tab 1. There is a resolution. I'd like to call for a motion to adopt it. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Wellington, thank you. It's good to have you with us.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much, Beryl. Are there any objections to the motion as made and to the resolution as presented? Hearing none, the motion carries and the resolution is passed unanimously. Second agenda item is a transcript of the meeting of December 9, 2020. Does anybody want to offer revisions to that transcript? There being no offers, may I have a motion, please, to approve that transcript from the 9 December meeting? Errol, thank you. Wellington, thank you for the second. Are there any objections to the motion, the resolution? Hearing none, are there any abstentions? Hearing none, then that motion carries and the resolution is passed unanimously. The third agenda item, the mission statement and revised performance measures and metrics. We've just gotten an excellent discussion of what this involves. But Sarah's going to present whatever she believes is necessary for this board to hear, in addition to what Craig has said.
Which is very short, Mr. Chair, just one procedural matter for the board. Just to note that the governance committee of Atlantic Avenue did discuss the changes that Craig just presented to us at its meeting on March 2nd, 2021. And the governance committee of Atlantic Avenue did recommend that change.
Sarah, thank you very much. Then I'll ask for a motion to adopt the mission statement and revised performance measures.
So moved.
Thank you, Wellington. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much, Beryl. Are there any objections to the motion as offered? Hearing none. Are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, then the motion carries and the revisions are adopted unanimously. The last agenda item, I believe, is the annual review of the bylaws. And Sarah, are you going to talk to us about that?
Yes, and very briefly, the Minorities Law does require the Atlantic Avenue subsidiary to annual review and approve its bylaws. And the Atlantic Avenue Governance Committee did meet on March 2nd, and no changes are being recommended at this time, Mr. Chair. And the Governance Committee has recommended approval of those bylaws in their current form.
Sarah, thank you. Are there any comments about the motion I'm about to ask for? There being no questions, no further questions. May I have a motion, please, to approve the bylaws as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Wellington. Second, please. Jerry, thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion? Are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, the bylaws are adopted unanimously. I believe that is the last agenda item.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Ruben, thank you for your report.
We'll adjourn this and then we'll go.
May I have a motion, please, to adjourn the Atlantic Avenue meeting? Jared, thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Joan Sullivan.
Joan, thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion to adjourn? Is anybody going to abstain from that vote? Hearing neither, the meeting stands adjourned.